I mean, they're the ones that administer the local program, so we'll get somebody over here.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Mr. President. My other question was during the, I guess, the process, I know you can't talk about it, but you could say what was included. Was it included about infrastructure and the amount of ability to be able to do infrastructure repairs at the time of the bidding process?
I mean, one thing that we have is we prepared an economic development plan that we'd be happy to share and sit down and explain our thinking behind it to anyone. You know, generally, sorry, we actually prepared an economic development plan that for us was sort of part and parcel of how we were approaching participation. Definitely in the this whole idea of the difference between a kind of a synergies cost-cutting approach versus an economic development pro-growth approach. I can say that you know, our view of the right way to build the energy hub and to develop the gas network is to increase the tempo of investment. And we felt that given some things we talked about in terms of this multiplier effect, you know, being able to make the investments in a way where you increase the amount of demand for gas and increase the efficiency, that we felt there could be a virtuous circle that would have led to more investment, more jobs, and it wasn't about cutting costs or cutting jobs.
And then also, how about, I guess, replacements as part of that? Was it included as part of that as a pipe replacement as part of your bidding process?
In our economic development plan, the idea was to dramatically reduce the time frame for upgrading the network.
Okay. And
Time frame, like a generic time frame. Like the other group would say, we could pay for this amount of pipe work to be replaced in the next 10 to 15 years. Can you give us a ballpark figure?
I think you know, I've heard estimates of how fast you could do it ranging from 25 years to 30 years from the current 88. I think it's all somewhat hypothetical. I think the more interesting thing is this idea of an integrated approach. So, you know, back to the idea is that if you, obviously with safety always being the first order of the day, and making sure that any critical pieces of network that in any way could danger folks, that those are dealt with, taking that as your starting point, we also felt there's a way that you could make some choices about which parts of the network and how you upgraded it to create some islands where you had new pipe that allowed you to have high pressure within those areas that would allow you to, within those areas, obviously areas where you were hoping to attract businesses, build some of these combined heat and power plants we were talking about, where you could you could really change the way in which you were delivering gas to that section.
but so what I'm saying is part of the RFP was not considered, it wasn't saying like we want to know what your pipe replacement timeline would be, and or would that be able to be increased as part of your bidding process? Was it or wasn't it? I don't know.
I don't know if, I mean, I'm trying to be somewhat careful, but all I can say is if you look at our economic development plan that we're happy to share, you'll see that we had a pretty aggressive plan for, and I want to applaud what PGW currently does. You know, they're replacing a lot of pipe every year. But part of the theory was that if you took just a slight riff on what they're doing and you included private capital, that you could possibly do it more rapidly and do it in a way where you could increase the amount of gas coming into the system.
Okay, thanks.
We've had a lot of talk about the main replacement and the level of increase of doing that, but even with the money, the process for laying new pipe is not as easy as just going out and opening up the ground. You do have a lot of considerations to take into account for being able to lay new pipe, because you have to coordinate that not only with the water company, all the internet people,
Cable.
and all of that.
Traffic.
And the electric doesn't go in the ground, but all of, any and everything that goes in the ground. And also, how do you coordinate going into neighborhoods, installing that? So while you would get all this grandiose idea, well, we can do more pipe, but at the same time, there are considerations that have to be taken into account. I have a question to ask you about the Chicago, your public-private relationship with them. Were they a public utility? And then they, prior to your collaboration, they were a public utility?
Correct. They were actually one of the first in the Dow Industrial Index list. So they've been a publicly traded utility from probably 70 years ago. But as any city utility, generally you're closely linked to the city and you form formal, less formal or informal partnership with the city one way or the other.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else who has a question? Councilman Higgins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to echo your concern about shutting down the entire city for the total build-out of our infrastructure, but certainly the pipe replacement is necessary. So however we can accelerate that for whatever means is in a safe manner is critical. On the public partnership, is there, all right, so twofold question, all right. A partnership can be in any matter, right? I mean, it could be, we right now, we're having these hearings and we're talking about the possible asset sale or not sale or partnership or new business opportunities and expanding the energy hub. So it doesn't mean it has to be distribution, right? I mean, where are the real opportunities for a partnership in growing the workforce and growing economic development and growing the region as a hub? All right, so that's one. All right, and two, in partnerships, which, just finding out about and still don't know much about it, they could be whatever parties agree to. Is that correct? Yep. All right, so they're my two questions, if you could, or all three of you, and you can expand on that.
I think the first point is very well taken, which is that you could do it as part of a big approach where you could basically do a sale, but where the city retained a stake and had special veto rights. But you could also do something more simple, which is simply today do a partnership with someone to work on expanding and putting the private capital into the LNG facility. You could do it to create a network of CNG fueling stations in the city. We've cited the example of what's going on potentially in Southport. So I think that the answer is that it is a flexible model, and I think the reality is that when people use that expression, you're correct that it's flexible. There's a lot of different versions of it, and I think that's one of the reasons it's attractive, because if the result of now there being public discussion about this subject is that there's a consensus that we want to change the status quo, we want to find a way to attract private investment. On the other hand, we want to protect some of these existing programs. Well, we're simply throwing out there that a version of how you could do that would be to create a bespoke, sort of a special a construct under a P3 that would allow the capital the freedom to invest in some of these things, while at the same time giving the city a right to say no to something it doesn't like.
This has, been, quite informative, and, who knows where we go in the future, but certainly the attention's going to be wrapped around, opportunities. But we are in the people business, and that's what we do. We represent people, all kinds of backgrounds and economic and social and business neighborhoods and of alike. So we're in the people business, and we want to make sure that our people get the best services, in a safe manner with the highest return, with the best efficiency. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for this panel? Councilwoman Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Provide example, if you would.
Speak into the mic, please.
If you could please provide example on how you engage MBE, WBE, DBEs, and it goes to a line in your testimony where you speak about entrepreneurial initiatives and experience. Anyone or all of you?
Well, that's at the heart of what we do. We are, in fact, a minority enterprise ourselves, so we're very sensitive to reaching out to those communities. And again, through our community stakeholder model, we've reached out to scores. You know, I've listed a few of the community groups that we've met with in the past, but there's certainly a lot more of those groups that we've talked to, and we continue to engage at the table because that's ultimately where we stand. Historically, Councilman Kenyatta Johnson indicated that, you know, it's kind of refreshing to see an African-American face in this context. That's why Chariot Energy was created, because I looked around and said, when world economic policy is being discussed, who at that table looks like me? And I didn't believe that anyone did, and that's why I set out to put together the team that I did, so that, you know, our folks, people that look like me, could be represented at that table.
Indeed. At the table, at square one.
At square
Not
one.
brought to the table at square Z.
That's correct.
Gentleman in the middle. Forgive me for not remembering your name. Can you just
Charlie.
provide some example of how you've addressed this issue in Chicago?
Concession.
One very similar approach to what John has been sharing, because in Chicago, frankly, you have very similar profile. You have very similar, very diverse profile of the city, and you have a very sizable share of low-income population in the city. So that's why we felt kind of it might be a comparable, I mean, nothing is totally comparable, but it's a good illustration of this approach that allowed us to find common language with every small community in the city and to get representation from a broader community in this company. And frankly, that's why only the program was successful.
Frankly, that's why what?
The program was successful
Okay.
because it was not an easy process, and in that case, it was actually not a councilwoman, but Attorney General, Lisa Madigan. She was asking the same questions.
Is that right?
And until all the groups came together, it would be impossible to execute on this pipeline replacement program.
So what are the lessons learned from Chicago around MBE, WBE, DBE participation that you would bring to this potential experience?
Frankly, that you have to engage with these groups before you have a deal, not after you have a deal.
Say that again louder.
That you have to engage with every of these groups before you have a deal, not after you have a deal. Because people want to be at the table, right? They don't want to be on the menu.
That is one of my favorite expressions. If you're not at the table, you will be on the menu. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
You struggled with her. Any other questions or comments? Thank you so much for your testimony. You might, if you can, stick around just a little bit in case some other questions come up. Thank you. We will now have Mr. Sam Bernhardt, Matt Walker, Tracy Carluccio, and Mary Donahue. Good afternoon. Would you state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony?
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name's Sam Bernhardt. I'm the senior Pennsylvania organizer for Food and Water Watch. We're a national consumer advocacy group that works to keep food and water safe, accessible, and affordable. I'll be reading mostly from a letter that Food and Water Watch and our coalition partners drafted in anticipation of today's hearings. That letter has been submitted as written testimony, but I also have copies. we'd like to commend Philadelphia City Council for putting citizens' interests first by keeping Philadelphia Gas Works public. As council recognized, the proposed sale of PGW to UIL Holdings left the city vulnerable to higher rates, lower and less local employment, and less oversight of spending and safety issues. So we applaud that decision. However, several of council's proposals for PGW drawn from Concentric's highest and best use study are problematic, as I'll go into detail to in a second. Overall, we're concerned first that plans to invest millions of dollars in natural gas infrastructure through pipelines, liquefaction capacity, and natural gas vehicle fleets would mire PGW and the city in costly projects at high risk of becoming stranded assets, with costs passed on to consumers. Second, increased liquefied natural gas, or LNG production, would endanger Philadelphians and every community through which trucks, trains, or other vehicles loaded with LNG would pass. Third, conjuring increased demand for shale gas would commit us to the risky proliferation of fracking elsewhere in Pennsylvania, including our watershed, the Delaware River watershed. So first, the question of these stranded assets. Concentric proposes to diversify PGW's gas supply by building capacity to connect to Marcellus wells and develop natural gas vehicle markets. This proposal is flawed in that it fails to acknowledge the risks, including climate implications, of further entrenchment in fossil fuel infrastructure and the possibility of future natural gas price increases. Piping shale gas from the Marcellus to Philadelphia could put consumers at risk of exposure to radon, a known carcinogen present in Marcellus shale gas, sometimes at high levels. The half-life of radon is just under 4 days, meaning that some gas produced in the Marcellus region could wind up in the Philadelphia market several days later, containing harmful amounts of radon. Because radon is inert, it does not break down when homeowners burn it or use it in their kitchen stove, so it accumulates. In their resolution to authorize hearings, council proposed to build capacity to transport natural gas to Philadelphia, even though as the Concentric study pointed out, their current gas supply quote has served PGW and its customers well. Building pipeline capacity to deliver Marcellus gas to Philadelphia would only benefit consumers if costs, quote, for this new, more expensive capacity are less than what PGW would have paid had they continued with gas solely from the Gulf. This plan would rely on natural gas prices staying low, which is unlikely, as discussed in just a second. As for council's proposal to expand its NGV fleet, the natural gas vehicle fleet, and other fleets across the city, similar cost and capacity issues apply. Concentric even stated that converting fleets might not even be a significant economic value, and it would depend largely on whether PGW can support fleets and fueling stations. NGVs may have lower fuel costs in comparison to gasoline-fueled fleets, but NGVs are more expensive to purchase, and potential upward swings in natural gas prices could lead to negligible savings. And we heard as much from the gentleman from PGW just yesterday in discussing how the plan to purchase more of these vehicles was actually scaled back. It's unlikely that natural gas remain a cheap alternative to renewable fuels for long enough to justify such substantial capital investments. There are many factors that could raise the price of gas substantially in the next few years before PGW and the city would have a chance to recoup the costs from those investments. I want to move on quickly to the LNG issue and quickly just say that council's proposal to increase liquefaction capacity for natural gas not only is misguided, but it's dangerous. LNG produced in Philadelphia would need to be transported out and there are no good options. Concentric states that drilling and fracking operations are, quote, the second most promising near-term market for LNG. And this would require LNG to be transported through densely populated urban areas here in Philadelphia and in the surrounding communities. The LNG would either be trucked along Pennsylvania's roadways or shipped via the busy Delaware River port system that is not capable of safely carrying this cargo to the Atlantic Ocean. Lastly, I want to just touch on the fracking issue. And simply see there are a lot of words that come to mind when thinking about fracking and the actions that this council has taken, or the statements that this council has made on fracking. But I guess one way of putting it is that I'm having to remind myself that we're sitting here in the same Philadelphia City Council that just 2 or 3 years ago passed several resolutions opposing fracking in the Marcellus Shale, and is now presenting itself as a potential driver for demand of that shale, which unfortunately could put Philadelphians at risk by increasing demand to the point where the Delaware River Basin would be open to fracking. So I encourage caution on all those points. To conclude, we applaud the council's decision to kill the PGW proposal. However, we urge council to wield its control of this public asset for public good. Many of the current proposals entailed in the, quote, energy hub vision work entirely contrary to that goal.
Thank you very much. Next.
Hi, my name is Matt Walker, and I'm the Community Outreach Director with Clean Air Council. We're an environmental health organization headquartered in Philadelphia with a mission to protect everyone's right to breathe clean air, and we've been doing that for over 45 years now. Clean Air Council believes that any decision on the future of Philadelphia Gas Works and the concept of turning Philadelphia into a gas energy hub should be openly discussed before any decisions are made. The council is very concerned about the idea of using PGW to transform Philadelphia into a fossil fuel energy hub. A gas energy hub, as it's currently being considered, including expanding liquefied natural gas capacity and potential new gas pipelines from the Marcellus Shale, would very likely increase harmful air pollution and greenhouse gases emitted in the Philadelphia area, exacerbate climate change impacts, and hinder any chance we have to ensure a fast-paced transition away from fossil fuels to renewable energy. The council wholeheartedly supports Philadelphia being an energy hub, but a renewable energy hub. Our vision to bring more energy efficiency and solar energy to Philadelphia would improve air quality and spur local, good-paying jobs for Philadelphians that cannot be outsourced. The proposal to expand capacity at the Port Richmond LNG facility by adding a second liquefier could lead to an increase in air pollution from construction, trucks, and ongoing facility processes to an already overburdened neighborhood. Combustion in boilers, turbines, and compressors will primarily burn natural gas and will increase the amount of smog-forming pollutants, volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, and sulfuric acid mists. Fugitive emissions from compressors and engines, valves, pressure relief valves, connections, and flanges have the potential to emit VOCs and methane. Non-routine flaring emissions due to startup, shutdown, or emergency pressure releases can also emit similar pollutants. LNG expansion could result in increased traffic volume and associated emissions by trucks that will transport LNG. The council believes that any expansion of LNG can negatively impact health of residents living in Port Richmond and the environmental justice community. While Concentric claims that an expansion LNG would provide a cushion to enhance security to current customers, they state that any expansion would also have to be supported by LNG sales to off-system customers such as heavy-duty truck vehicles, competitive markets that carry financial risks with them. The idea of working with pipeline companies to encourage the construction of a new greenfield pipeline from northeast Pennsylvania to Philadelphia presents a huge financial risk for PGW customers and the city and would create negative public health and climate impacts. While PGW cannot control whether or not a new pipeline is built, it is a risky move to consider acting as a so-called anchor customer for pipeline developers, since the price of Marcellus gas is projected to increase and there are varying opinions about how much gas can be extracted. A new pipeline would have to traverse many ecosystems, agricultural areas, water bodies, and communities, including heavily populated areas. A new pipeline would have to include several enormous compressor stations to pressurize the gas. Compressor engines emit large amounts of smog-forming pollutants, including VOCs like benzene, a known human carcinogen, and formaldehyde, a suspected human carcinogen. Ground-level ozone, the main constituent of smog, aggravates lung diseases such as asthma, emphysema, and chronic bronchitis, and increases the frequency of asthma attacks. In addition, the gas industry leaks upwards of 17% of methane, of the methane it produces, and is the largest human-made source of methane emissions globally. Methane is 86 times more potent in warming our planet than carbon dioxide over a 20-year time period. While the natural gas liquids market may be outside of PGW's core business competencies, NGLs are a central part of the energy hub concept. The Mariner East 1 and 2 pipelines would bring NGLs from western PA and Ohio to Marcus Hook Refinery in Delaware County. Sunoco Logistics plans to construct new facilities at the Marcus Hook Refinery to store, chill, process, and distribute propane, butane, and ethane for distribution to local, domestic, and international markets. This new infrastructure will increase the amount of harmful air pollution emitted from Marcus Hook, and Philadelphia is 15 miles downwind of the refinery and will likely experience negative air quality impacts. City Council must address the potential cumulative air quality impacts of all the infrastructure projects and additional burning of natural gas for energy proposed under the concept of Philadelphia as a gas energy hub, and then listen to constituents about whether or not this idea fits their vision for the city. The council is concerned that the gas energy hub concept will result in mostly short-term jobs that aren't guaranteed for Philadelphia workers, while potentially leaving the city with environmental and economic costs for decades to come. The council fully supports PGW in their efforts to use gas more efficiently by promoting energy efficiency retrofits through incentives and financing mechanisms, especially in low-income communities. Besides the environmental, public health, and climate benefits of energy efficiency, retrofits and weatherization provides many local construction jobs and supports other businesses involved with this work. Jobs in energy efficiency can take advantage of the local workforce, and work is much more job-intensive than the natural gas industry. PGW should continue and expand its Energy Sense program and establish on-bill financing to help finance energy efficiency measures. In addition, PGW should accelerate its cast iron main replacement work as much as practical to prevent further methane leakage. There's a lot being done, and a lot that can be done, to realize the vision for Philadelphia as a renewable energy hub. For instance, this past year, City Council passed a resolution committing to promote solar energy in Philadelphia. The council urges City Council members to move quickly on implementing policies that relate to this, such as increasing local solar rebates and tying tax abatement for developers to the use of energy efficiency and solar energy in buildings. Clean Air Council is already teaming up with the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia to implement solarized campaigns in Philadelphia neighborhoods to spur growth in the solar industry. The American Council for an Energy Efficiency Economy completed a study in 2009 that found that with the right policies, energy efficiency and solar could spur the growth of at least 9,000 jobs in Philadelphia by 2025 in installing energy efficiency and solar measures. Based on National Renewable Energy Laboratory data, the council estimates that in Philadelphia, cost-effective rooftop solar can produce over 20% of the city's electricity needs, provide more than 4,000 well-paid jobs, and increase grid reliability. The Philadelphia region has the potential for 8,700 megawatts of rooftop solar, equivalent to about 25% of the region's energy usage. Over 20 years, this equates to $1.3 billion in direct economic activity annually for the Philly area. The indirect economic benefits, the annual would increase the number to $1.95 billion for the region, and Philadelphia could potentially get about 5% of this in the form of property sales and wage taxes that would equate to $97.5 million. And I'll note that the minority populations, including African Americans, receive a very small amount of jobs and economic benefits from the energy sector currently, including the natural gas sector. And the solar industry could provide jobs that more closely match the Philadelphia population's demographics, because they can more readily take advantage of the local labor. Displacing fossil fuel-produced energy with renewable energy reduces premature death, lost workdays, and healthcare costs. Reducing emissions is crucial in Philadelphia, where 1 in 4 children are diagnosed with asthma, and 80 people die every summer from ozone pollution exacerbated by extreme heat from climate change. The number of unhealthy air quality days is projected to increase by 70% in places like Philadelphia as a result of climate change. Philadelphia's low-income populations are often impacted the most from these weather extremes, and the health impacts from air pollution the most. With the price of renewable energy plummeting and the fact that natural gas prices won't remain cheap forever, it does not make economic sense to make such substantial capital investments in expanding long-term gas infrastructure. the council urges City Council to reject the plan to turn Philadelphia into a gas energy hub and to embrace a renewable energy future for Philadelphia. Thank you.
Thank you. The whole issue of solar energy has been a topic of this council, and I went with the economic, anyway, one of our local organizations. We went to California to look at the solar energy, and we were very excited about it, and talked to a number of companies and who we thought were going to move east, but they haven't come east yet. But we look at the cost and of solar energy, and I think that was prohibitive for them to even try to come into a large city like Philadelphia.
We have some local solar installers, and they right now, they say the costs are plummeting, the costs for people to actually go solar, and the Solarize campaign I mentioned in my testimony actually reduces the cost per watt significantly. If communities do it together, sort of decide to go solar together, they can get group discount rates. So, the point is the costs are dropping like significantly for solar, and the costs of natural gas are projected to rise, especially from the Marcellus Shale. So it's kind of, the council's perspective is if we're going to invest a lot of time, energy, and resources in building out some infrastructure to bring jobs to Philadelphia, why not invest that in renewable energy and solar as much as we can, rather than putting into fossil fuel energy future is going to be limited in the amount of time, and that can actually provide jobs and that kind of thing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Councilwoman Brown.
To your question, please. Is it not possible to engage in responsible energy conservation in the way you just described as a part of an energy hub enterprise? And so that instead of having what Councilwoman Sanchez would say an or, it would be an and.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, the council definitely supports, as I said, energy efficiency measures from PGW. We just don't support PGW becoming sort of an anchor customer for expanding additional natural gas infrastructure like a pipeline from Northeast Pennsylvania, expansion of other facilities that I mentioned in my testimony. We do think that energy efficiency is part of that renewable energy hub future, and so as much as we can save, replacing the cast iron pipes, that's part of it, and that I did see in the concentric report and in City Council's recommendations that it is possible for PGW to do that right now, to sort of expedite that process. So we do advocate for that to happen anywhere that PGW can stop methane, natural gas from being released. And yes, that can be done. The efficiencies can happen. That can save money, save resources, and then we can also push for things like solar
while we create jobs.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're pushing, and we push for solar. We're pushing for solar, showing the demand. There is demand for solar. That's going to bring those 4,000 or 5,000 jobs to Philadelphia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Tracy?
Yes.
Okay. Would you pronounce your last name?
Carluccio.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, council members and Madam Chairwoman, for the opportunity to speak on this important subject here today. I'm Tracy Carluccio, Deputy Director of Delaware Riverkeeper Network. Many of our members live and work in Philadelphia, and I'm speaking on their behalf and for the living communities of the Delaware River. We are a nonprofit, membership-supported organization dedicated to the protection, restoration, and defense of the Delaware River watershed, the entire watershed. And that includes the major tributary of the Schuylkill. The cleanliness of Philadelphia's drinking water and the river is greatly influenced by upstream watershed conditions, but it's also defined by the Philadelphia region's land use and way of life. And that's why we feel it's so important to speak here today. I'd like to focus on an unrecognized failing that speaks poorly about the practices of the fossil fuel industry here in Philadelphia, the very companies that want to be involved in the so-called energy hub that's being promoted at the hearings. This is an issue that Delaware Riverkeeper Network and the Philadelphia Fossil Fuel Transport Working Group, which we're a part of, brings to your attention because as elected representatives that are pledged to protect the constituents in the city, you are in a unique position to do something meaningful today and to provide some urgently needed protections. The working group submitted a letter to President Clark day before yesterday with a copy of a proposed resolution to protect Philadelphia that we have been discussing with Council members Kenyatta Johnson and Curtis Jones. We respectfully request action to move the resolution in response to our letter. As you may be aware, 2 unit trains of approximately 100 tank cars each carry Bakken shale crude oil from North Dakota into Philadelphia every day, totaling 3.6 million gallons of oil on each train, and the city is at risk every day due to the danger of pollution, accidents, and explosions from these oil trains. Federal regulators have found Bakken crude oil to be highly volatile, with a high gas content and a low flash point, making a significant incident during rail transport more likely. They also concluded DOT 111 tank cars, the most common type used, are substandard and likely to explode and catch fire when derailed, so-called bomb trains. And that makes it totally irresponsible to transport and handle this highly volatile, flammable liquid in these substandard cars. Yet, CSX and Philadelphia Energy Solutions are doing it anyway. Why? Because they can. It's less expensive, it allows for the rushed expansion of fracked oil in North Dakota to continue without missing a beat for those who are making profits off it, despite the dangers they are exposing the nation to, just like the Marcellus shale gas frenzy. PES is the largest oil refining complex on the eastern seaboard, the largest crude-by-rail facility in the United States, and the largest single customer for crude oil produced from North Dakota's Bakken shale, processing between 330 and 350,000 barrels of oil per day. Together with the other refineries in the region, that's 862,000 barrels of oil per day already being refined here. It takes a lot of traffic and a lot of risk to deliver that much oil here. And PES is reportedly expanding its refinery production this year, which could double crude by rail traffic. Are they going to fix the crumbling bridges and rickety tracks? Are they going to replace the substandard tank cars, add more brakes, seal up the leaky valves of these tank cars, make room to offload efficiently so trains don't sit and idle for long periods of time, sometimes overnight, right in neighborhoods, or sitting on top of a worn-out bridge? No. We have not heard any plans to make even the most basic changes to their crude by rail operations that would provide some level of protection to people in our environment here in Philly. PES and CSX are not even replacing the substandard DOT 111 tank cars, originally designed to carry corn syrup, not hazardous materials, that they use to carry their oil here twice a day on these mile-long trains. Their actions tell us it is not in their business model to fix the dangerous infrastructure before they expand and increase shipments and processing. That is very clear. Just look at how they're running the trains now. That's why we're coming to you, our city council. You are the one body that is charged with protecting us, and we're asking you to do that by adopting the resolution to protect Philadelphia, which calls for the immediate ban of DOT 111 tank cars by the federal government and other crucial measures that the city itself can take in order to provide some protection from these dirty and dangerous oil trains. Please move the resolution to protect Philadelphia. I now have one other aspect that I'd like to bring up regarding the gas and oil hub issue. The highest and best use report in the Energy Hub advocacy has built-in assumptions that are not valid. The concept of developing petroleum, gas, and oil or fossil fuels as a new economic engine in Philadelphia is, like the shale gas and oil bubble, more of a speculator's wish than one that is based on current economic realities and future trends. We ask City Council to examine the true cost of the gargantuan gas and oil hub that these private companies are pushing. The air and water pollution and the health risks that people who live and work here are going to be exposed to are equally gargantuan. According to a report by the Center for Effective Government, regions on the Gulf Coast coast, especially Louisiana and Texas, which we're talking about mimicking, are hotspots in terms of exposing school children to health risks. Philadelphia is a densely populated city, the most concentrated in the state, and its communities, such as South Philadelphia, in proximity to the PES plant, are disproportionately exposed to environmental pollution, making it an environmental justice issue. Pennsylvania is 6 in 48 states in the number of school children in vulnerability zones as defined by the Federal Toxic Substances Control Act. In Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Refining Complex is the second highest facility that exposes kids at school to risk. Is that what we want for our kids? Can we accept this reality without a complaint and jump on the gas and oil bandwagon that will increase health and accident risk and environmental pollution for our children and the vulnerable neighborhoods they live in? It may be a boon for PES and the big oil and gas companies and developers and transporters who we've been hearing about from these last 2 days. They are going to make lots of money, but what price will the city's people and the Delaware River pay? PES is already, at its present operations, responsible for 73% of toxic air emissions in Philadelphia. What's in it for the people who live here to be exposed to more of that? Finally, we caution City Council not to believe all the hype about the fracked shale mecca that is supposed to bring long-term employment and economic growth. Many technical experts and market analysts are questioning the viability of sustained production of gas and oil from tight shale formation. For instance, in North Dakota, the Bakken shale oil wells that I mentioned, they're fueling PES's expansion here in Philadelphia, are petering out. And after a very short production period, today, 80% of the wells being drilled in North Dakota to get this shale oil are just replacing the wells that are in decline. In shale gas plays, analysts are finding that production peaks in the first year after drilling and steadily declines, never reaching the highest production and economic return levels initially achieved. Some shale gas wells are being refracked just to keep the extraction going, but even they never recover. This is what is known as a classic economic bubble. And it means that many companies are spending more than they are making. A Bloomberg analysis, which I'm going to hand in, forecasts that increasing numbers of companies will fail in the Marcellus Shale because of the lack of enough gas to keep this infrastructure going. They're investing more in drilling than they're making back in returns. And that is a classic shale bubble. If we here in Philadelphia want a resilient, a reliable, and economic future, the most stable and secure path is a green economy with clean energy sources and technology. Philadelphia should be going all out to develop solar and wind and energy efficiency technology that will provide environmentally beneficial growth sectors and long-lived employment opportunities. We need to leave polluting and costly fossil fuel development in the past. We just can't afford more kids with asthma and cancer and more sources of pollution to our drinking water and river system. We want Philadelphia to get with a future that is secure economically and supports the healthy communities and the environmental values that we and future generations require and deserve. Delaware Riverkeeper Network opposes the plans that are contained in the gas and oil hub being promoted in these hearings. And that includes the LNG, the processing facilities, and the pipelines. We ask you, City Council, to stand up for the people of Pennsylvania and the health of our communities and the kids and families that live here and those that work here, and work towards a renewable future, not a fossil fuel future.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Ms. Donahue.
Okay. Move this closer.
State
Good
your name for the
afternoon.
record.
Mary Donahue. I'm a program organizer with Clean Water Action. Thank you very much for holding this public hearing. I have been working with several environmental and community organizations, as Tracy had mentioned, the Fossil Fuel Transport Working Group here in Philadelphia. And there is extreme concern with the negative public health and safety impacts that the expansion of fossil fuel transport will have in our communities. The idea of the Philadelphia Energy Hub that has been discussed these past few, 2 days, complete with greenhouse gas emitting pipelines, more Bakken crude oil trains, an LNG export facility on the Delaware River, and a private for-profit gas utility that is not accountable to the public is terrifying. Philadelphia has already experienced increasing numbers of oil trains through its neighborhoods, but residents have not seen an increase in public hearings, community outreach, emergency response planning workshops in their communities. I know that City Council has been working to hold CSX accountable to maintaining its crumbling rail infrastructure that supports 2 oil trains per day, but that it has been a long and challenging road. These trains are traveling through Philadelphia right now. If the city is struggling to safeguard our communities from energy activities that are happening right now, how are we going to protect our communities from the environmental and public health threats that will come with the expansion of fossil fuel projects in the name of becoming an energy hub? Philadelphia Energy Solutions Refinery is the largest customer in the nation for Bakken crude oil, refining more than 20% of all the recovered crude oil in the Bakken region. Every day, 2 CSX oil trains deliver 160,000 barrels via the 25th Street Bridge, a major subject of the rail infrastructure hearing that Councilman Kenyatta Johnson and Councilman Curtis Jones co-chaired back in March. The public hearing was a necessary response and important to the night Philadelphia barely escaped disaster. On January 20th, 2014, 7 tank cars derailed on the Schuylkill Arsenal Bridge, 6 of which were carrying Bakken crude oil. An oil tank car leaned towards the Schuylkill River for days before authorities were able to right it. While the March hearing was an important step, more public hearings need to be held on the conditions of existing infrastructure and the improvements needed to ensure the safety of Philadelphia's communities. Accidents and explosions have increased since Bakken crude by rail has exploded in growth. There have been at least 12 major derailments involving crude by rail since May of 2013. The most devastating was in Lac-Mégantic, Quebec, where 47 people were killed and half of the business center was destroyed. What would a train derailment of that magnitude look like for Philadelphians? Nationwide, communities and local governments have been taking action to protect their citizens from the imminent danger of crude by rail. Bakken crude oil is highly volatile, containing several times the combustible gases as oil from elsewhere. On top of that, it is often transported in substandard DOT 111 tank cars that, according to the National Transportation Safety Board, can almost always be expected to breach in the event of a train accident. We need City Council to take action to protect our communities from a major train derailment. I'd like to take a minute to quote Jessica Gould. She is the president of West Passyunk Neighbors Association, representing community members from 18th to 25th Street, Passyunk to Mifflin Streets, and unfortunately she could not be here today. There is, quote, "There is a growing awareness of the crude oil that CSX trains are carrying through our neighborhoods at an increasing rate. Our communities are vulnerable to oil train derailments, and we cannot ignore the loss of life, property, and environmental contamination that oil train derailments have caused across the U.S. and Canada. It is by sheer fate that no one has been seriously injured in Philadelphia, but it is only a matter of time. We are scared, and more must be done to ensure our safety and alleviate our fears." Jessica is one of the hundreds of thousands of people that live within the half-mile evacuation zone that should there be a catastrophic oil train derailment as determined by the U.S. Department of Transportation. These trains endanger densely populated communities and business centers in Philadelphia, including but not limited to South Philadelphia, Rittenhouse, the Art Museum District, University City, Northwest Philadelphia, threatening the health and safety of thousands of people that live and work in these communities. There are still many who are not aware of the danger and less would know what to do in the event of an emergency. We need the city's Office of Emergency Management to be proactive and hold emergency preparedness workshops specific to oil train derailments in communities along the rails. Residents in Philly have a right to be informed and involved in this process. I would like to make a complaint for the record about yesterday's events regarding testimony. Several individuals were signed up to speak. They had called to confirm. They were told that they were going to speak yesterday, and they were, pushed off the agenda and pushed to today. Many people who were planning to speak yesterday are not able to be here today to speak. Public safety must be a part of the Energy Hub conversation. If council is committed to doing what's best for Philadelphians, we need to include everybody at the table. In conclusion, a draft resolution has been proposed to City Council members that would urge the federal government and the city to ensure that crude by rail is held to the highest safety standards. I encourage City Council to support this resolution and protect your constituents before even more rushed expansion occurs. We cannot wait for a disaster to act. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. How much oversight or control does the city have over the rail and CSX? Is that a federal government responsibility?
USDOT and
Yes.
Yes, USDOT and PIMSA, which is the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, are really the federal agencies that handle that. However, the city can take a stand and say that they want the DOT 111s to be immediately banned, and they're
That's
actually...
easier said than done.
Well,
I have
but-
CX
Right.
railroad running through my neighborhood, and I can't get them to clean up the land around there. So, I
Exactly.
mean, it's
That's
really a
right.
very a serious.
We know how
and we've been very responsible by having hearings here to discuss this matter. But the real culprit, not culprit, I gotta watch my mouth. The real
Culprit.
entity that is responsible for this is the federal government,
Yes,
and that's where
that's
this
true.
discussion should take place with your congressmen and your senators. And I don't say don't
Absolutely.
bring it here, but that's information for us. But we have no jurisdiction over that.
No,
Because
you
if
don't
I
have
could
jurisdiction.
have some, I get my lots cleaned up around the CX train tracks.
That's
They
right.
won't. They don't even respond to us. Yes.
Leadership and tutelage. However, I do take up issue with CSX only from the simple fact that they are federally regulated, but I do come from the perspective if you still do business in the city of Philadelphia, we had a chance through our hearings to at least begin that dialogue and try to hold them accountable somewhat. We have made some strides on the southwest part of my district, and I have a terrible viaduct bridge in South Philadelphia that we are addressing. And most recently, L&I have stepped up to the plate and they put CSX on notice because of certain parts of this bridge, like chunks of concrete is falling off.
Right.
And it has to be a coordinated effort with our congressional representatives, but we have used the council hearings as a way to, one, begin putting the spotlight on them, because the train that was going to derail, the tanker that was going to derail was obviously in my district over Schuylkill River, where the Schuylkill River Trail is, and I'm like, okay, they didn't respond to the city of Philadelphia until like two, three days later. Once we did the hearing, put them on notice, folks came up from Jacksonville, Florida, trying to be responsive. And so we will continue to advocate and address these issues, and I'll let you know where we're at in terms of the legislation.
One thing I did want to mention, Mr. Johnson and also Madam Chairwoman, is that cities across the United States are beginning to take action in order to advocate that the federal government ban DOT 111s. Resolutions have been adopted in Spokane, Washington, also in other cities in Washington, also in Oregon, and Baltimore is considering passing a resolution as well. Albany, New York recently passed a resolution calling for the banning of the DOT 111s and operational changes that would provide more safety to people who live within proximity of the tracks. We're also asking, and if you look at the resolution, there's 4 different parts to it, and we're also asking that the city make direct comment on any permits that Pennsylvania DEP or other agencies under the state on the expansion of any of the facilities that use the oil that's transported on the tracks. So we think that by the city commenting and saying that we need to get these tracks in shape. We need to get these dangerous tank cars off these tracks. We need to double up the brakes, put double jackets on the cars themselves, fix the valves. These are the kinds of upgrading of standards that we need before we want to see any expansion that would increase the traffic on these railways. So
Thank
this
you
is the
very
kind of
much.
advocacy that we're talking about. Mary also has more information about what emergency management can do.
Well, when we have that discussion about further, I think the councilman will probably have a further discussion on that. We have a lot of people here to testify today, so that's an issue that we will continue to have dialogue on, and appreciate your coming today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Hershey, we'd like for you to come forward, please. This morning, there was a discussion about the LIHEAP program and the customer service programs that we have that you could explain for the record, particularly for our newer council members. Councilman Johnson left. Oh, he's right, he's just right. Okay, thank you. And the jurisdiction, I mean, the LIHEAP program, how that is, who administers that program, and also the other programs we have for our low-income customers at PGW.
Okay, with me is Denise Adamucci, Vice President of Regulatory Compliance.
And customer
Sure.
programs. Good afternoon.
Go ahead. Would you state your name for the record, please?
Denise Adamucci.
I can't hear you.
Sorry, Denise Adamucci.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, can I ask my question?
Sure.
If you don't mind? Yes, I know, I just wanted to clarify it, though. I wanted it to come from me for clarification. Is that okay, ma'am?
What's that?
I'm going to ask the question that you were just asked. Is that-
No, she's
that's all
here
right?
to answer they're here to answer your question about
Yes, ma'am.
the program. That's why we called
Yes.
them back. So
Thank
she was
you.
just identifying herself for the record.
Great.
So we will ask you to ask your question, Councilman, to the
Thank you, Madam
witness.
Chair. Thank you very much. Yeah, the question was basic. When I was talking to, we're looking at doing a public-private partnership, and, you know, my primary concern was just making sure that.
Could you speak into your microphone, Councilman?
Yes, Madam Chair. We were talking about the issue of creating the possibility of a public-private partnership with PGW, and one of my key concerns, one of the key issues that have always come up in talking to a lot of my constituents throughout my district is the maintaining the various social programs that PGW administers right now. And I had to talk to my staff to get clarity on a couple of them, but obviously LIHEAP, which I was just told is administered, the funds are administered through the federal government. The customer responsibility program, the ability to not kick a person off of, not terminate a person's gas usage in the dead of winter in the event that they can't pay their bill. Give us an idea of how that process worked, that in the event that we do engage in a public-private partnership, those particular programs will protect those who most need them.
Sure. With respect to winter termination, the PUC has requirements about who you can terminate in the winter and who you can't. So for people who are 150% of the federal poverty level or below, you would actually have to petition the PUC to terminate someone in that income group. So that's the winter protection for them. The LIHEAP program, it's federal funds, and it's administered in Pennsylvania through the Department of Public Welfare. So many of our customers receive LIHEAP grants. They're paid directly to PGW through an agreement we have with the state, but they go to the individual customer's account. And CRP is established under the PUC's obligation to have universal service programs for customers. And the utilities all have customer assistance programs. Ours happens to be CRP. And the PUC does approve our program through a plan that we file every 3 years.
And the Senior Citizens Discount Program.
The Senior Citizens Discount is a program that was grandfathered when we came under the jurisdiction of the PUC. We have about 20,460, I think, participants right now. So we can't take any more participants in, but if someone was to die and their spouse happened to have been living there and was eligible at the time it was grandfathered, they would remain on the senior citizen discount. That's how the program works right now.
In the event that we were to move forward in establishing a public-private partnership, and I don't know if you can answer this because you actually work for PGW, but I'll ask anyway, what would be the recommendations from your perspective that in the event that we move forward, what would be your professional recommendations that these certain safeguards will be put in place to protect these type of programs? Like, how would you recommend we would go about doing that?
I'm not sure I could speak to the public-private partnership concept, but with respect to universal service programs, the utilities in Pennsylvania are required to have them. And the PUC makes sure that that all the utilities have them and that they're appropriately funded. So PGW has to have some programs to ensure that everyone has service available to them.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any other utility in the state that has a senior citizen program?
Not to my knowledge.
The other question is, does the PUC have senior citizens discounts?
I don't know that they have approved programs for any other utility. I don't believe there are any other programs for other utilities, but I'm not certain.
Okay, I guess we have to ask that. So, to your knowledge, Philadelphia is the only city that with senior citizen discount, and also senior citizens. That was not my question. Can't understand my writing.
The senior citizen discount program was created by an ordinance of this council, and it existed from that time until 2003, when an agreement was reached between PGW and CLS, and that agreement was approved by the PUC, as Denise indicated, to close the program to new applicants, but to keep all those who were on the program and for their lifetime.
I guess my question was, we have other programs for low-income citizens that you offer. Is that required by the PUC? Is that those programs were instituted just because PGW thought it was the right thing to do with some pushing from council members?
PGW had the first low-income discount program, which is now the CRP, which was created in 1989 by agreement with PGW and CLS. Subsequent to that, the PUC adopted similar rules that each company creates similar programs, and now they're much more sophisticated, and all utilities have a program which is like ours but not precisely the same.
The PUC approves each utility's programs separately. So utilities have various differences in their CRP programs, for example.
So the utility initiates the program and gets approval from PUC.
The utility works off of the program it already has, and if you wanted to make changes to the program, if we wanted to make changes, we would propose it in a universal service plan filing that we make every 3 years.
So I guess what I'm asking is, does the order come from the PUC to have low-income programs, or is it initiated by the utility?
There's actually a statutory obligation to provide universal service, so that's what the PUC is working in accordance with.
And to supplement, there are regulations out there which give general guidelines as to what they should be. Then the utility creates a program and asks the PUC to approve it. Once they've been approved every couple years, whatever, then there can be proposals to change it, and the PUC decides to approve or not.
All right, thank you very much. Councilwoman Sanchez.
Councilman Johnson asked about in a P3 situation, what would a package look like? You say you couldn't comment because you don't know or you've never seen one?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think I've seen one either, though.
Okay, thank you. Steve, I don't know if you...
I don't think it really matters whether it's a municipal, investor-owned P3 program. The PUC has general requirements, and if you're providing utility service in Pennsylvania, you have to comply with those regulations.
I just wanted to know if there was an existing document or, you know, anything to base that on. I agree with you in terms of the PUC ultimately makes the final call. I'm sorry. I agree with you that ultimately the PUC, which some folks have faith in and others don't, will have as generous programs as we do. I was just wondering if there was any such agreement around the Commonwealth around that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Was it Nancy Mifflin? Is there Nancy Mifflin here? Nancy Mifflin is not here. And, okay, next we'll call Christina Simeon, Robert Silverman, and Suzanne Edwards.
I'd just like to set the record straight about yesterday's testimony. We were here last night till about 8 o'clock. We were not able to accommodate the witnesses who wanted to testify at the point they desired. And so it was not that we did not want them or provide them with an opportunity. It was not at the time that they wanted to testify.
Hold on, ma'am.
Could I say something? Sue Edwards submitted her one-page.
Okay, so she's
writing,
not here.
and it's beautiful, so maybe someone could read it.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry. You said Ms. Edwards submitted her testimony?
Yesterday, she
Okay,
handed it to you.
we can just have it read in, we can have it into the record, add it into the record. Is Mr. Silverman here? Okay, and Ms. Edwards gave her testimony, and Tamara, I'm sorry, you are Christina?
Christina, yes.
And so why don't we, Tamara Clements here?
Yes.
All right, and make sure we fill that third chair. We ask the rabbi. Thank you. Good afternoon. You can start. Just say your name for the record.
Yes. Well, Mr. President, honorable members of City Council, my name is Christina Simeon. I'm the Deputy Director of the newly established Kleinman Center for Energy Policy at the University of Pennsylvania. Thank you again for the opportunity to address the council today. I was born and raised in Philadelphia and currently reside in the 1st District. The Kleinman Center, which I mentioned, newly established at the University of Pennsylvania, aims to provide unbiased thought leadership on policy issues and assist in the development and implementation of balanced, efficient, and innovative public policy. Today, my testimony is going to focus on the broader issue of developing Philadelphia into an energy hub rather than the narrow issue of the sale of PGW and those costs and benefits. First, it's important to define what the energy hub is, and in this context, the energy hub means connecting low-cost Marcellus shale gas via a new large-scale gas pipeline to Philadelphia for residential, commercial, and industrial end uses. Therefore, full realization of the hub is dependent on those three elements: low-cost gas, a new natural gas pipeline, and sufficient end users of gas. There are costs and benefits identified by consultant reports of the PGW sale or alternative utility construct models. However, the sale of PGW is a keystone event in realizing Philadelphia as an energy hub. Since securing pipeline project finance requires sufficient end-user commitments of gas offtake or use, and PGW is the largest gas user in the region. Furthermore, as a gas distribution utility, PGW has restrictions, if not complete limitations, on capital that it can contribute to transmission or pipeline investments. Its jurisdiction is on the distribution end of the natural gas delivery system. Therefore, private control of PGW opens up opportunities for pipeline finance beyond the regulated distribution utility unit's balance sheet. Estimates indicate a pipeline from a Marcellus Shale region, again, which we're talking large-scale 24 to 36-inch in diameter pipeline, about 120 miles long, would cost about $500 million. These projects have very long time horizons for development due to the local approvals that are needed, as well as community integration and actual construction. There are many benefits that accessing low-cost gas will have for Philadelphia gas users, such as PGW customers, industrial users of gas, and like the Philadelphia refinery. Significant job creation and economic development can occur from enabling this low-cost gas to lower operating costs for homes and businesses, attracting new industrial activities to the area, revitalizing the manufacturing sector, and creating growth opportunities for the 3 Philadelphia area refineries. Users outside of Philadelphia may also benefit from exporting low-cost natural gas through liquefied natural gas to other areas of the world, or exporting other refined gas products. Building the pipeline, therefore, is critical to realizing these benefits. However, there are also a host of costs that policymakers need to consider to balance the value proposition realization of this energy hub will provide. Philadelphia has challenges in meeting attainment of health-based air quality standards, particularly ozone and particulate matter. Permitting any new or expanded industrial activity could result in additional public health exposures, but it also may affect permitting requirements for other industrial or commercial activities within the city. Studies indicate, and it could also affect transportation-based emissions and certain transportation funding. Studies indicate that exporting natural gas will actually increase domestic gas prices. Any increase in domestic gas prices through a liberalized export market will erode the benefits of cheap natural gas for the residents, businesses, and non-export industrial users in the city. There are also safety issues that may arise from gas exportation due to the very delicate nature of liquid natural gas processing and movement, coupled with what the Congressional Research Service has identified as a potential terrorist attack. Also, communities around Philadelphia may oppose pipeline construction for a variety of reasons, and also gas-producing regions outside of Philadelphia may experience impacts associated with gas development. In basic terms, the sale of PGW goes way beyond the narrow issue of transferring ownership of a municipal gas utility. In fact, this is a watershed transaction that may fundamentally change the future of Philadelphia for the better or for the worse. I believe City Council, like many other policymakers, seek to maximize benefits and minimize costs, and careful consideration needs to be given to ensure that Philadelphia can take advantage of all of the opportunities it's provided with, while also avoiding the unacceptable risks. Upon request, the Kleiman Center for Energy Policy stands ready to work with Drexel University and other stakeholders to serve as a resource to City Council and to other regional decision makers in helping to navigate these issues. Activities may include, but are not limited to, facilitating stakeholder information sharing and engagement, developing platforms to enable research and analysis on regional macroeconomics to identify costs and benefits to the region and to individual stakeholder groups, and providing education to interested parties. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the council, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tamara Clements, and I've been working with the Fossil Fuel Transport Working Group, and I came here specifically to talk about pipelines. First of all, can you hear me? First of all, I want to say 2 days ago, I spilled some oil on my best blouse, and I can't get it out, and my blouse is ruined, and it was olive oil, pure olive oil, and I think about our city having a pipeline burst and what that would look like, first of all. There's no safe way to move fossil fuels, and I think we need to think of a renewable energy hub and a green Philadelphia. I brought a list of pipeline ruptures and explosions from the year 2000, and I just wanted to show you how large it is. This is the United States.
Is it okay if we have it placed into the record?
Pardon me?
Is it okay if we have it placed into the record?
Yes.
You not have to read it all?
Oh, I'm not going to read it.
All right, thank you.
I'm going to be really fast, actually. I'm really fast because I'm nervous.
Thank you.
Okay, the reasons for failure are ruptures of seams, leaks of valves, pinholes, stress fractures from train transportation over it, lightning strikes, severe storms, rifle shots, power lines falling down, storm damage, backhoes, excavators, automobiles, flash fires at compressor stations, internal and external corrosion, explosions during repairs, misread maps, misinterpreted leaks, confusion over location of pipelines, failed gaskets, frost melting unevenly, the depth of the pipelines, and the results are often, unfortunately, severely burnt workers, forced evacuations, lives lost, reservoirs, farmland, waterways, groundwater contaminated, animals are suffering and dying, the release of greenhouse gas and other dangerous gases, roads shut down for days, people separated from their homes. Okay, I'm just going to go right to, in Tioga, North Dakota, in September to October of 2013, a farmer smelled oil for several days. 865,000 gallons spilled over 7 acres, and crews tried to burn off the oil at first to hide it, and they think that corrosion was suspected as a cause. And Governor Jack Dalrymple said he was not told of the spill until October 9th, and it started at September. And it was estimated it'll take 2 to 3 years to clean up. When Boris and his buddies walked out here today, I turned around, I said, please don't go, it's rude, please stay. And he said to me, I'm really sorry you feel that way. Another thing that the responses of the industry do, besides turning their head, is illegal burning to hide damage. They use netting and fast-growing plants to hide the oil under waterways. They lack proper maintenance. They have failure to hire qualified workers. Undocumented workers are cleaning up with unsafe circumstances. They don't notify authorities. Fire and gas detectors are not powered, refusing responsibility when neighbors report illness from spills. They refuse to give information to first responders. I'm going to go down so you aren't totally bored with all this terrible stuff. There aren't any agencies to enforce the rules in rural areas. There aren't enough people to inspect. And only 44% of pipelines requiring PHMSA inspection are inspected. Only 7% of other pipelines are inspected. There are no rules for maintenance of pipelines. There is purposeful understaffing of inspection personnel. And I'm finished.
Finish? Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony. You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Hi, Rabbi Mordechai Liebling. I am here representing the Philadelphia chapter of Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light, an organization of congregations and clergy people all across the state of Pennsylvania. I'd like to first thank City Council for basically rejecting the sale of PGW. I think that's a very wise decision on your part. I'd also like to remind you and thank you for your previous decisions to not allow fracking in the area and recommending that there would be no fracking allowed in the Delaware River Valley. So you have shown great wisdom in the past in protecting our citizens and our city. And I am calling on you to show even greater wisdom and dig even deeper into your hearts. It is the testimony that we've heard about possible jobs. We need jobs in Philadelphia. Testimony we've heard we could have a manufacturing boom in Philadelphia. I can see that it is all very appealing to City Council to try to bring some short-term economic fixes. But they don't work. And I am asking you to think in the big picture, to think of your legacy, to think of your children and grandchildren. An energy hub of fossil fuel is not a new energy hub. It is an old energy hub. It is old and it leads to death. We're asking you to refocus and create a new renewable energy hub that leads to life, that leads to possibilities for you, your children, and your grandchildren. We know for sure that the expansion of fossil fuels will destroy the world as we know it. That is why President Obama last week took a timid step, but a step towards reducing greenhouse gases in the United States. If City Council goes ahead and tries to build an energy hub, you are going ahead towards increasing global warming, towards increasing the suffering of millions of people around the world. I saw that City Council was moved by the testimony saying that there will be increased jobs for low-income people in Philadelphia, particularly the Black and Hispanic communities. But those are also the communities that suffer first when there's climate injustice. Those are the communities that suffer asthma. Those are the communities that suffer cancer. Those are the communities that lose days at work. Those are the communities whose kids end up going to breathing polluted air and going to and living in terrible conditions. For the sake of climate justice, for the sake of the people, you have to stop investing in fossil fuels. You need to be investing in the future, not the past. And we've heard testimony this morning about solar energy possibilities. And in terms of the economic facts, every dollar invested in conservation issues produces anywhere between 3 and 4 more jobs than a dollar invested in drilling new energy sources. Conservation, weatherization, and renewable energies produce dollar for dollar 3 to 4 times more jobs. So what we want in our city is jobs. That is the direction to go in. If what we want in our city is a vibrant future, that is the direction to go in. The people of Philadelphia will fight for their right to live. We will not allow an energy hub that will kill our grandchildren. That is not permissible. You should, if you read the latest reports, it shows that there will be a 200% to 300% increase in flooding in Philadelphia before the end of this century because of climate change. That is almost a guarantee, a 300% increase in flooding. You know what that's going to do to the refineries that are right next to the river? What it's going to do to the pipelines that are right next to the river and the coast? They could be destroyed. leading to incredible public health damage, with tens of thousands of people perhaps dying because of that. We cannot allow Philadelphia to be put at such great risk. The same thing is true with the trains that we heard about this morning. At some point, the flooding is going to overwhelm those tracks, and who knows what's going to happen to a train. We have to protect the earth. We have to protect our people, and I implore this city council to reach to your highest selves, to not give in to short-term fixes, to really believe that there is a future that's possible, and invest that in renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your testimony. We really appreciate you coming down and weighing in on this very important issue. Thank you. Ma'am. Ma'am, the lady sitting next to me. Yeah. Ma'am, you were here yesterday, right? You were trying to testify. You were attempting to testify yesterday. That wasn't you? That was not you? Okay, never mind. Okay. Okay, I remember. Okay, thank you.